The second round is officially set with the LA Clippers getting the win in Game 7 today, locking in their matchup with the Utah Jazz. So, who wins this series? In today's video, I'll be taking a look at the second round matchup between the Utah Jazz and LA Clippers and predicting the series, each team's strengths and weaknesses, the players who need to step up, the keys to success, every little detail. Before we start, if you're new here and enjoy the video, be sure to subscribe. For more NBA content like this, I'm trying to reach 17,000 subscribers by July, so all support would be greatly appreciated. Anyway, with that being said, let's take a look at this second round matchup. The Utah Jazz flexed their muscle when fully healthy in round 1 against Memphis. Though the Grizzlies were great in their own rights and put up a fight, stealing a game, they were simply outclassed in the final 4 games by Utah. The Jazz proved why they're the number 1 seed and will look to continue their hot play into round 2, now fully healthy and locked in. While being pushed to 7 games by a team they tanked to play against definitely doesn't sound like a pass mark for the Clippers, you have to give credit where credit is due. After 2 games, this team was completely counted out. The hate on them was absolutely ridiculous, and many people were frothing at the idea of them becoming first round exits, yet again disappointing everyone for another season. However, Kawhi Leonard and co would not go down that easily, and they managed to fight back from a 2-0 deficit, stealing 3 games on the road to clinch their place in the second round for back-to-back seasons. Leonard put on an absolute clinic. The Mavericks simply had no answer for him all round long, and though the game plan for the Clippers was a bit shaky to start, they stuck to their guns and made life difficult for the dominant Doncic to move on. The Clippers are extremely overhated for practically no reason, so to shut all the haters up last series with the comeback win will be a huge momentum booster for them coming into this series, which will be particularly important against the best team in the West in the Utah Jazz. With that being said though, let's take a look at the strengths and weaknesses for each team and how they will impact each side in this series, starting with the Utah Jazz. The biggest strength of the Jazz is their defense. This is obviously thanks to arguably the defensive player of the year, Rudy Gobert, but other defensive-minded pieces like Royce O'Neal, Mike Conley, etc. has allowed Utah to garner a top 4 defensive rating this past season. Against one of the best and deepest offensive units in the league, featuring guys like Kawhi Leonard, this is going to be extremely important, as obvious as that sounds. It may be the thing that gets them over the line in this series, especially if their offense isn't up to scratch for whatever reason. As for weaknesses, the Jazz's biggest weakness to me is their ball control. They're a top team in the league in turnovers per game, and that could be costly in the high-pressure playoffs. Last round, they turned the ball over the most out of any of the 16 playoff teams, 13 times a game. That has to be sharpened up quick smart, especially since they're no longer playing an 8 seed, but a legitimate contender. The Clippers have elite perimeter defenders, so they're likely to make the most of the pull ball security too, so this weakness should be an area of focus for the Jazz that needs to change this round if they want to win against LA. For the Clippers, their biggest strength is their 3-point shooting. They've been amazing from downtown all year long and finished the regular season shooting over 40% from 3. Though the Clippers shooting from distance did drop off in round 1 against Dallas, it didn't keep them out of games. For example, game 6, where they shot below 30% from behind the arc, yet still came away with the win. That just proves if they're on fire from downtown, like they have the high possibility of doing so, they will be extremely difficult to stop and will cause some serious headaches for their opposition. So this is a major point of focus for the Clippers in this year's playoffs, and particularly against Utah, who are notoriously a good defensive unit. However, a big weakness for the Clippers is their interior defense. The Clippers sat in 25th for blocks per game this past season, which shows on the surface how underwhelming this area of their team is. And it's also evident they don't have a player to match up and contain a superstar big man like a guy like Nikola Jokic. Though Rudy Gobert is obviously nowhere near the same talent level as Jokic offensively, he still may be hard to maintain. So I think this could be a concern for the Clippers, especially since one of their big man upgrades that they made in the past season in acquiring Serge Ibaka barely played last series. Will he play more this round for defensive purposes? Who knows, but this is definitely something to watch out for in this series for LA. So those are the strengths and weaknesses for both teams. Now, let's take a look at a couple of players who need to lift this series for their respective team, because it will give their side the best chance of coming out on top and moving on. For the Jazz, I can't lie, there's no player or players that stand out to me that need to step up this series, as all of the guys on this roster have been fantastic as of late. If I had to choose one though, I will say Royce O'Neal, mainly because he's going to likely be tasked with guarding either Kawhi Leonard or Paul George for the majority of this series. He needs to reduce their influence as much as possible in order for the Jazz to win. A guy like Kawhi can be so dominant and influential that even taking a small amount of his impact away is beneficial. O'Neal also needs to be consistent offensively. He can be pretty mediocre sometimes on that end, so he needs to step up and hit his shots. Again though, and most importantly, his play on the defensive end could be the determining factor of the outcome of this series, assuming he gets tasked with Kawhi like he did during the regular season. So I'm expecting Utah will want a big series out of him if they want to move on. As for the Clippers, I want to see Patrick Beverley step up. He was very mediocre last series, and his defensive impact and hustle that he normally brings to the table definitely didn't seem to have the same presence as per usual. Against the Jazz, who have multiple guards who can create, Patrick Beverley will need to improve defensively to shut them down and help the Clippers on that end. There's not much else to say. Beverley just needs to be better defensively because Utah have so many great options that they can run their offense through, so he needs to be better at slowing them down, because that will result in the Clippers having a far better chance at winning this series. Finally, before we get into my final prediction, what are the keys to success for each team? For the Jazz, it will be executing defensively. Their offense can hold their own now. They've proved that so far this postseason, and they no longer need to rely constantly on Donovan Mitchell to get them buckets. So their biggest question and biggest concern to me is if they'll be able to effectively contain Kawhi Leonard and/or Paul George. If they're able to do so, they probably win, but if they don't, it's hard to see them moving on, so they've got to lift on that end. As for the Clippers, their key to success will be shutting down Utah's backcourt. Against Memphis, the combination of Mitchell and Conley was lethal, and in the pick and roll, with Gobert, it was even better. They tore the Grizzlies apart with that combination. If the Clippers can step it up defensively and make life difficult for Mitchell, Conley, Clarkson and Gobert, Utah's offense will be difficult to generate. That will obviously be very beneficial to the Clippers, and with the tools they have, they should be able to try pull this off, because if they can, it's going to increase their chance of moving on to the Western Conference Finals significantly. But with that all being said, after looking at the strengths and weaknesses for each team, the players who need to step up, and the keys to success, who wins this series, the Clippers or the Jazz? I've got the LA Clippers moving on in 6 games, and here is why. Personally, I feel like the Clippers match up very well with the Jazz and should be able to contain their stars. If Kawhi and PG showcase their defensive prowess, as well as assuming that guys like Patrick Beverley step up, I can see Utah's backcourt struggling for multiple games in this series. I also think the Clippers' offense will be able to outplay the Jazz's offense more often over 7 games. The Clippers are far deeper on that end, though both teams are quite deep offensively, and LA superstars have greater one-on-one scoring ability than Utah's, so in a longer series, which I'm expecting this series to go for, they'll be better equipped for the slower pace. The biggest problem for the Clippers that I believe will probably force this series to at least 6 games is their ability to defend the interior. Obviously, Gobert isn't great offensively, but he still has the potential to hurt the Clippers, especially in the pick and roll. So I think a combination of that and a couple big performances from Mitchell, Clarkson, etc. could see the Jazz taking a couple of games. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this series goes the distance because Utah has the best record in the league for a reason. However though, I just can't go past the Clippers. It feels wrong to doubt Kawhi Leonard after the way he closed out last round, so considering that and the other factors that I've just mentioned, such as depth, I've got the LA Clippers moving on to the Western Conference Finals. And that will conclude the video. What do you guys think of this? Who do you have winning this series? The Clippers or the Jazz? And in how many games? Let me know all your thoughts down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop it a like and subscribe. But with that being said, I am out. Peace.